Before I can write a single line of dialogue, I need to understand the world of the play. And in my case, that means smugglers, secret coves, and a coastline filled with ghosts and contraband. Welcome back to How to Write a Play. In episode 1, I chose my idea, the story of the Smugglers of Auchencairn. But to make it real for the stage, I need to dig into the history, the geography, and even the folklore that shaped the lives of these people. This is where the world building begins. When you start to write a play, the where is just as important as the who. And for me, the geography of Auchencairn is more than just a backdrop. It's a character itself. The Solway coastline in Cumbria is jagged and secretive. It's full of inlets and coves and offshore islands, the kind of places that practically beg for whispers of smuggling and danger. Take Balcary Bay. This isn't just a beach. It was a hub with stories of underground vaults connected to Balcary House itself. You can picture the smugglers dragging barrels of brandy into the cellars under candlelight, while upstairs respectable folk pretended not to know. Then there's Heston Island. At low tide, you can actually walk across the causeway. Smugglers with stashed goods in its caves, waiting for the right moment to move them inland. But miss the tide, and you are stranded. That's instant stage tension right there. A chase, the tide rising, the gauges closing in. Further along the coast, you've got Rascarrow Bay, Redhaven, Barloco Bay, and Mulloch Bay, each perfect hidden landing point. Mulloch Bay was even nicknamed Brandyburn because so much spirit came through there. Imagine that, a bay so soaked in contraband, it literally got rebranded by the locals. And this wasn't just about the shore. The coastline was connected to a web of pack horse routes leading north through the Galloway Hills. So once the barrels and bales were landed, they'd vanish inland under the cover of darkness, carried through forests and moors bound for Castle Douglas, Dalbeattie, even as far as Glasgow and Edinburgh. It means the stage of this story isn't just a single set. It's a living, breathing landscape. Stormy seas, caves lit by lanterns, country roads echoing with hooves. Places where danger could arrive from land or sea at any moment. And that geography wasn't just scenery. It was opportunity. It shaped the whole smuggling trade. And it's the foundation I'll be building on in this play. If the coastline gave smugglers their hiding places, the economy gave them their reason. This wasn't mischief for fun, this was survival, and in some cases, fortune. So, what was worth risking your life for? The big five: brandy, rum, tobacco, tea, and salt. Later on, there were luxury goods too, like silks and fine cloth, the kinds of things that shouted wealth if you could get your hands on them. Now here's the thing. All of these things were taxed to the hilt. The government slapped heavy duties on imports, which meant legal prices were sky high. But if you knew the right cove and the right crew, you could get the same barrel of brandy for a fraction of the price. Smuggling wasn't profitable, it was common sense. Picture the route. Ships set off from the Isle of Man, sometimes Ireland, crossing the North Channel under the cover of darkness. In the still hours of the night, they would slip into the Solway Firth, hugging the shadows with their sails down. Then small boats took over, rowing barrels ashore at Auchencairn's coves or hauling them into the caves on Heston Island until it was safe to move them. From there, the land network kicked in. Pack horse trains. Imagine it, a line of horses clopping silently through the Galloway hills, laden with contraband, while the drivers whispered and shushed each other, praying the gaugers weren't waiting around the next bend. But here's the part I love the most. It wasn't just gangs of criminals hiding in the dark. Smuggling was woven into the community itself. Fishermen doubled as lookouts, crofters and farmers lent their barns for storage, and women kept watch on the cliffs and signaled with lanterns when it was safe to land. Even ministers, at least according to a local rumour, were happy to take a cut or turn a blind eye. Everyone had something to gain: cheaper goods, a share of the profit, or simply keeping their neighbours sweet, because in a small village, saying no could actually be more dangerous than joining in. So the smuggling economy wasn't an underworld, it was the world. It was how people ate, how they kept warm, how they stayed part of the community. And of course it was how fortunes were made and lives were lost. But where there's money, there's always conflict. And in Auchencairn, that meant clashes between villagers and the gaugers, sometimes with blood spilled on the sand. So every play needs characters, and history gives us some ready-made. Take Johnnie Girr or Girr, a local crofter turned smuggler, remembered in stories and folklore. He wasn't some anonymous shadow, he was a face the community knew, a man who walked the same lanes as everyone else. Yet, in the records, he's remembered for outwitting gaugers, dodging capture, and turning survival into legend. The kind of character you could imagine delivering a cheeky monologue straight to the audience. Then there's Agnew of Balcary. Now, here's a different energy altogether. Agnew was feared, spoken of almost like a smuggler kingpin who dominated the coast. Balcary House, perched above the bay, wasn't just a home. It was whispered to be the headquarters of an underground vault where contraband was stored. Picture a candlelit cellar, rows of barrels, voices echoing against stone walls, while men plan their next move. That's pure stage atmosphere. And it wasn't just locals. A Manx firm, so that's the Isle of Man, there was a firm called Quirk, Clark and Crane, and they're rumoured to have built or controlled Balcary House, turning it into an international hub for trade. That link to the Isle of Man reminds us this wasn't a small-time thing, it was a network stretching across the sea. But of course, for every smuggler, there had to be opposition. The gaugers, customsmen sent in to enforce the law. They were outsiders, not part of the community, and they were often hated for it. Imagine walking into a village where everyone is against you, knowing you could be ambushed in the dark. They weren't just officials. In the villagers' eyes, they were enemies. And this is where the drama lies. It wasn't simply law versus criminals. It was law versus livelihood. A father might risk prison to feed his family. A minister might preach against smuggling on Sunday, then drink smuggled brandy on Monday. Some villagers embraced the trade, others despised it. And that tension, neighbour against neighbour, community against itself, is ripe for the stage. And when the clashes came, they weren't polite. There are stories of violent skirmishes, men killed in the sand dunes, barrels smashed, muskets fired in the night. Picture a scene with villagers rallying together, trying to outwit the gaugers, knowing if they failed, everything they'd hidden could be lost in an instant. This isn't history, it's conflict. And conflict is the heartbeat of theatre. And yet, Auchencairn's smuggling history isn't only written in ledgers and blood, it's also wrapped in folklore, ghost stories, mermaids, and haunted inns that kept the fear and mystery alive long after the last cargo landed. History gives us dates, the names, the records, but folklore gives us the atmosphere, the whispers in the dark, the things people swore they saw but could never prove. Take Daft Annie's steps. On Heston Island, there's a line of jagged rocks in the water, said to be built by a girl called Anne, who thought she could make her own bridge to the mainland. The story goes she drowned in the attempt. Locals say the stones are cursed, and you can almost hear her voice in the tide. Imagine staging that, the sound of waves, the echo of a drowned voice, woven into the smuggling tale. Or the Rascaille mermaid, a story as old as the coast itself, a spectral figure said to haunt the bay, luring men to their deaths. Was she a warning about the sea's dangers, or a tale to scare children from wandering too far? Either way, in a play she's not just myth, she could be a metaphor, a symbol of temptation or risk, of how the sea gives and the sea takes. Then there's the Rerick poltergeist. In 1695, at the Ringcroft of Stockin, the parish was gripped by reports of a haunting. Stones thrown, objects moved, strange voices heard. For a community already steeped in superstition, it was proof that unseen forces walked among them. That fear would have been alive in the smugglers' era too. And of course, the Smugglers' Inn in Auchencairn. Now I used to work there, pulling pints under beams said to have once hidden contraband, and people whispered of ghostly presence, of barrels that never quite emptied, of voices in the empty rooms. Every time I worked there on the night shift or the late shift, and the pub was empty or nearly empty, and I had to go down into the cellar, I half expected to feel the cold hand on my shoulder. So this blend of gritty reality and ghost-soaked folklore is what makes the world of Auchencairn so powerful for theatre. On stage, you can move from the clatter of hooves on a packed road to the eerie silence of a haunted cove, from a smuggler's oath whispered over brandy to a mermaid's song carrying across the tide. It gives the play two textures, one hard and real, the other shadowy and mysterious, and that tension between fact and myth, between the living and the dead, is what exactly gives this world its pulse. So when I sit down to write, I'm not just dealing with ledgers and barrels, I'm stepping into a world where the line between history and legend is blurred, and that's a gift for any playwright. So that's the world my play will live in. Not just a coastline on a map, but a stage that covers coves and caves, causeways and cellars, not just goods in a ledger, but barrels of brandy, bales of silk and tobacco carried through the night on pack horses. Not just names in a record book, but smugglers, gaugers, and families bound together in secrecy. And above all, the whispers of folklore, drowned voices in the tide, mermaids in the bay, ghosts in the inns, the kind of stories that made every creak in the dark feel like a warning. When you stitch those pieces together, the hard history and the haunted atmosphere, you don't just have facts, you have a world the audience can step into, smell the salt air, hear the clash of steel, and feel the dread of footsteps behind them. And that's why research isn't just homework, it's the foundation of theatre. It's how you make a stage feel alive. But a world without people is just scenery. And in the next episode, I'll introduce the ones who will bring this world to life. The smugglers risking everything, the gaugers hunting them down, and the villagers caught in between. Characters with secrets, loyalties, and flaws that will drive every scene. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, if you were writing this play, would you lean on the smugglers, the gaugers, or the folklore? Because next time, it's time to meet the characters. See you in the next episode.